Welcome to the Innovative Pedagogy Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Garcia, and we have a great program for you today. Today we have a special guest, Augusto Ejanda. We both have had the opportunity of working at the same site for a couple of years, as well as being mentored by some of the biggest influence in our educational sphere. He's a graduate from UC Riverside and San Diego State University, and he has been teaching in the Chula Vista District for the last 5 years. During our interactions and moments of working together, we have heavily talked about the importance of student-teacher relationships, which leads us to our topic for today, which is student-teacher relationships. So welcome to the show, Mr. Ejanda.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I'm really glad to be able to finally have a chance to talk to you about this. And you were one of the main people highlighted just because of our interactions during like recess duty and really just you emphasizing how your relationships are with your students. And I will definitely say that one of the things I always just took notice is during the quote-unquote break that we get as teachers during recess duty, I just saw you always out there, whether you were on duty or not, but you were hanging out with your kids, playing basketball. So just even those little things, I will tell you that really inspired me during the few years that we did get to work together. So, but I do want to actually ask you kind of an ice-breaking question, and that is, what do you most remember about a teacher or an educator or somebody in the educational field that had the biggest impact in your life?
I would say for me, it wasn't much of a teacher. It was more of an educator. It was my high school counselors. I had a lot of high school counselors I went to Chula Vista High School here, and just the counseling team at my high school worked beyond what they needed to do. Like, they were club leaders, they were advisors, they were, they would stay late in the day to just help students out that needed help. And one counselor in particular, she just always, asked me questions. She had a strong relationship with my mom, so I guess that might have had played a role. There was another counselor there, and we were part of a group together, and we dealt a lot with tolerance, and we created a tolerance assembly at my high school together. And again, just him being involved, even though he wasn't even my counselor, just him being involved with that, and teaching me tolerance and letting me know how it is to be more accepting of others. And then that led me to starting what would you call it? Like a tolerance club for the LGBTQ community at my school. And stepping outside of my comfort zone and being a leader in that sense, because it was an uncomfortable place for students of the LGBT community to be at that time, and to just be to get out of my comfort zone and to be a leader in that club really put me in a different light amongst my peers, because I was in a different group of friends, and for them to see me in that light kind of put me in a different light with them, and I think it was much more of a positive light for me. And then we also had another counselor there who would take over for my counselor, and she, to this day, I call my students mija, mijo, nice. Muchacho, muchacha, and it's all because of her. Like, she would call me that, even though I'm not of the Hispanic descent. Like, I'm Filipino, and she would still call me that. And I think now it's just endearing for kids to hear a non-Hispanic teacher calling them that. Right. And it's coming from the heart. I'm not just calling them that for fun, It's coming from the heart, that because these kids are my kids for the 7 to 8 hours that I see them in the day, Like, they are my family. And for me to call them that, I'm not just poking fun at them. I mean, at first when they hear it, they probably think that, but then throughout the day or throughout the year, they understand, like, hey, like, Mr. Honda's calling me that because he cares now.
Right.
So that left a lasting image in me, was that, like, her calling me that, and, just always checking in on me, even though she wasn't my counselor anymore, she just checked in on me, was just a lasting image of what I think about when I was getting into education, was my high school counselors. So
that's really impactful. And then considering at the same time, I mean, we understand the demographics that we got to work with. Mm-hmm. So hearing even phrases like mijo or mija, mm-hmm. it really has a big impact, because it's like this is the stuff that even myself as Hispanic, like, that's the stuff that makes it very comforting. It's mm-hmm. it's that home feeling. And mm-hmm. and the truth of the matter is that when we work with our students, this could be maybe even sometimes the safest time that they have with us, mm-hmm. Whether it be those 6 or 7 hours usually of students that know that, all right, now that I'm consistently in your classroom and That's extremely important, and I believe it's very important for us as educators to always establish that moment of safety, and even learning phrases like that, or when we take ownership, or just adapting them ourselves. I mean, I know you're a father, and congratulations, you're gonna be a father again in the next few months.
No,
that's right. Oh my gosh,
we just gave birth. So
that is right. Well,
now I'm father too.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Because I remember calling before this even podcast. You were like, "Hey, dude, my wife's about to deliver today, so my apologies." That is exactly right. So that's really cool. But I just know that father instinct that you had, even just being around from when the first one came around, it's always been part of you. So that's really, really cool. And I do want to tap in a couple questions, just because this is such a rich topic, and one where it can go various ways. But I do want to narrow it down to at least a couple things. And we're in a new era right now where the whole concept of restorative practices is being shared across the United States and pretty much the world. But there's a big need of putting the focus and emphasis on student-teacher relationships. That's being a part of that. So my question to you is, why do you think that is?
I think that there's an emphasis on student-teacher relationships now because there's a lack of it before this. When I think about my high school, like when we were talking earlier, just talking about the student-teacher relationships as a whole, I just remember telling you, like, I didn't have a student-teacher relationship. And I think now we're at the forefront of it all because we are those kids that grew up without it, and now we're adults now, making it a priority for these kids' lives, for making it a priority for the students to have that relationship. And it's just one thing. I mean, the relationship is the reason why I became a teacher. And for everyone else, I think they're slowly starting to realize that if a kid has a relationship with their teacher, that they will work harder for that teacher, that they will try their best for that teacher, regardless of where they are,
right?
Like, regardless of what level they're at, regardless of where they stand at home, if they have a bed to sleep in at night, when they get to school, if they have that relationship with that teacher, they're going to try their hardest for that teacher, regardless of what's going on. And I think, just with everything going on with like the social media stuff happening with, like we were talking earlier, the SEL, social emotional learning that's happening, we're realizing that we are the people. Teachers are the people that are with some of these kids for the most part of the day, and that we need to build a strong relationship between us. Just like how, whenever we have conferences or whenever we have awards assemblies, we realize some of these kids are the way they are because they got that parental relationship at home.
Right.
So you build off of that. If you have a strong parental relationship, you're going to have a strong student in your classroom.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you can build that at school, why not do that? So, building like a parental relationship, but, as a student teacher, and making that the foundation and building from there and making sure that these kids are feeling welcomed and feeling like they can accomplish something and grow and progress and be the students that they can reach their full potential. Absolutely.
And it goes back down to really understanding that full purpose. And I feel like one of the advantages that we both have actually had, even at the beginning of the year, even with my current job situation of being now working as one of the lead teachers here at the Innovation Station, shameless plug there, but one of the things is the whole building on the strengths of students. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I know that I would do, and I mean, you can attest to this also, is like, because we were fortunate enough to be like the first classes that came through this program, even though we've also heard, and I've heard of teachers that actually give this basically, it's kind of like a Strength Finders 2.0 type of exam to these students, and use that as a form of, one, building a relationship and then also supporting the students, which, of course, this is another topic for another podcast, but it's one of those things where if you understand who your students are, if you understand what their strengths are, you can feed off of that. And it's almost like, it reminds me back, of course, what you were saying right now of the parent-student relationship, or parent and child relationship. I've heard my parents say this, like, "Oh, I know my kid." Mm-hmm. I know, and we've heard it in conferences. Yeah. Like, "Hey, I know my kid. I know what they do. I know how they are," and that's great. I mean, and unfortunately, during conferences, when I've heard those phrases, it hasn't been usually positive. But the reality is also like it's true also for the strengths. It's definitely true for, and even my parents, I've heard growing up, like, "Oh, we know what we have. We know what we have," and I'm pretty sure you can attest now. of being a father.
Yeah.
As far as like seeing the strengths that your first one has, and maybe noticing some potential strengths that your second one has. You know, I know being a few weeks old, but I definitely agree with that. As far as we have that opportunity to be that impact and that constant impact Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So. Is there anything else you thought of that you wanted to add to that, or
You know, like when I'm hearing you say like when parents chime in, like I know my kid, I know how they are, but I don't know about for you, but when I was in school, I was a different kid at school than I was at home.
yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
at school, I was that kid that would always do his work, always keep my desk clean. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. When I get home, it's different because I was comfortable at home, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas at school, I still felt like they were well, I still think my parents as authoritative, but it was different because it was an endearing and authoritative, where at school, it was kind of a scary authoritative, you know?
Yeah.
So when parents come in and they say stuff like, I know how my kid is, like, I know how he is at home, but I always tell parents, like, the way they are at home and the way they are at school is completely different.
That's true.
Especially because some of these kids might have an authoritative parent that takes nothing, you know?
Right.
Whereas at school, I wouldn't say I'm the most... I mean, I know I'm not the authoritative figure. I know I'm not the strict teacher. A lot of the terms that I hear used to describe me at school is like chill, relax, you know?
Right.
But I still do have high expectations. And for parents to say, like, I know how my kid is, I feel like that's doing their child not a disservice, but it's not fair for their parents to say that at a conference when we know how their kid is as well, you know?
Correct.
And know how their kid is as a student, not as a son or a daughter.
Right.
And it's different.
And it reminds me actually, you're just saying that as a story that I dealt with last year when we were there at the same site. And I remember there was a student that I got that came to my class, and the mom was like, you got to be on him, you got to be on him, you got to be on him. And it was very funny because it was at our first teacher conference. She's like, all right. She says, you know what, Mr. Garcia, I know how my kid is. And then she says, is he doing his homework? I'm like, yes. And she's like, oh. And then she asked, like, okay, how are his test scores? I'm like, actually really good. And then later on throughout the year, it was one of those things with my student and I were like, hey, like, isn't it kind of crazy that we're kind of, I mean, quote unquote, messing with your mom? Like, she doesn't believe who you are anymore.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. So, I mean, I just saying that, it's reminding me of even just that opportunity that we do have. It's like kids can be like, you know what? I don't want to live under this stigma or this stereotype that my parents think I have at home, but then them actually to see that. So absolutely, I mean, we can have that influence and that respect and that I should say more that positive impact on them. So
and a big part of it too is, you know, like having a classroom environment where grade level isn't the level that you want them to be at. You know, it's a growth mindset for me. You know, like grade level is the goal, is where we all want to be, but it's having a growth mindset, so we have differentiation when it comes to curriculum and when it comes to teaching, but when it comes to students learning and students levels, we don't have that differentiation. Like, we don't push that on the kids. But for me, I've always had this mindset, like, if we're going to differentiate the kids on our end, like, they need to understand that they're all different, that they're all going to grow at different levels, and they know the grade level standard. They're not dumb. Like, they know they have to be at 7th grade level by the end of 7th grade. But some of them just aren't. And for them, they know that they're different, like different levels, and there's differentiation. So for them to just have a growth mindset that, like, I'm going to grow by this amount in this amount of time, you know, and having that goal, I feel like this year I did it. I pushed it a lot. Like, we have to grow. Like, you have to show your parents you're growing. We have to show our principals we're growing. We have to show other teachers that we're growing. And me pushing it this year, I feel like my kids grew quite a bit because I concentrated on growth mindset, not much more of like, we have to be at grade level, you know? And for them, that created a sense of comfort in their classroom that they can learn at their level, that they can succeed, they can progress. Whereas if you have a teacher or someone in their head saying 7th grade level is where you need to be, I feel like they won't try as hard because some of them are 3 grades below 7th grade level.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's just like in their mindset, they're already defeated because it's like, I can't grow 3 grade levels in a year. I only grew 0.5 last year.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's not fair for the kids to expect that from them. So to expect them to grow, I think is totally fair and is what I feel like they can accomplish, you know?
Right.
So if we just expect them to grow and to be able to grow, we're going to be, like, the kids are going to have that belief system, like, okay, there's not that much pressure, like, and they'll do wonderful things, like, they'll grow. They will grow.
Right.
So,
And again, this goes back down to, like, they want to do it, and they want to do it for their personal gain, but at the same time, let's not forget, like, they have a coach. They have somebody cheering them on their corner.
Yeah.
And where maybe in years past, that might not have not been the case, or even someone that understands. I remember never going to forget my first year even there. I had a student, and she basically told me that, Mr. Garcia, I wasn't able to get my homework done last night. And I said, okay, what's going on? She says, why was that? And she says, did you hear on the news last night of the shooting that happened around the school? I'm like, yeah. She says, well, that was around my apartment complexes.
I remember that.
And I told her, I said, you know what? I'm more concerned about your safety. I said, don't worry about your homework. I says, how are you right now? She says, I'm okay. I says, if you need a break throughout the day, I says, just let's take it easy. Like, I says, anything you need. And it went back again to that part of like, hey, you know what? She cares. Like, he cares for me.
Yeah.
And she felt like, you know what? I'm in a safe place. And I even promised her, says, you're here, you're safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And it was one of those things where later on, and it was one of those situations where I showed up in the middle of the year, but her growth and her eagerness to learn and her eagerness to like, hey, Mr. Garcia, look at this new book I'm reading. I was like, I never told her like, hey, I need you to go pick up a book.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where like, hey, you're safe and you're in my classroom and I'm going to protect you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, her eagerness to learn, just for some reason, it came about herself, you know?
Yeah. I think it naturally comes out in kids when they have that, like you said, they have that coach. And for us, it's being that coach and being that cheerleader to make that student that is in everyone, that desire to learn that's in everyone come out, you know what I mean? You know, and when I look at it, we have to look beyond, like we have to see how the community is impacting these kids.
Right.
You know, like I've come from a school working in the inner city, you know, like and where we're working at right now isn't as what we would call like inner city, but it is the same demographics of students.
Right. Right.
But, you know, like realizing what's going on in the community, realizing how that's affecting these kids is a big part of the restorative practices that we, you know, like tapping back into your question.
Yeah.
Is a big part of the restorative practices, and using that to, again, like see how we're going to restore the learning environment.
Right.
You know? So, and a lot of that is community affected because they all live around each other. They live in houses right next to each other. They live in houses right next to school. So if something like that, like a shooting at an apartment complex, affects one kid, it's going to affect another.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that kid feeling that way, and for her to be comfortable talking to you about it, that's what we want.
Exactly.
And you know, I always believe in like checking in on a kid. Like a lot of my students will say like, well, you don't check in on me like that. And I'm like, I do, you just don't know it. You know, like you don't think I am because it's you.
Right. Right.
You know, and like there's times of the day where I will randomly go up to one of my students and just start talking to them. And they think it's just a normal conversation, but it's from things that I know. Like if like I was made aware of something by admin, and they say, oh, they don't know that you know, like come about it a different way. And they just say, we just want to let you know, and so that way, you know, you're in the loop. And I'll make it a point to talk to that student sometime in the day, not in front of everybody, like whether it's walking to lunch, on the playground, like you said, and just pulling them aside and just, you know, checking in on them, and where they think it's a normal conversation, but it really pushes that student-teacher relationship forward, and it really pushes their comfortability with me as a teacher in the light. And, you know, like these past spring conferences, it was apparent that like me being on the playground, me doing these check-ins with these kids. I started doing not community journals. What do I call them? I call them like student journals or response journals. Sorry, I call it response journals, where I started responding to the kids, like having like a pen pal type thing.
Yeah.
Like anything that they need, they can write in this book. Anything that they need, like any problems that they have that they don't want to share with the class, they can write in there. And even when I'm having problems at home, I do. I write to the kids. So like last year, you guys implemented Dr. Lemos, who was here on the podcast a couple months ago. Yeah. She last year when she was at the school that we were working at, she brought the I wish my students knew, right? No, I wish my teacher knew.
Yes.
Yeah. So this year I've had a couple times where like home life has affected my work life. And my kids can tell. I don't want my kids to be affected by it, so I did I wish my students knew.
Yeah.
And we opened the class with that. Like that's the restorative circle that we had that morning was, I wish my students knew, and I wrote to them, and they read that. And then my students responded to me, I wish my teacher knew, and then I challenged them with another one, which is I wish my classmates knew, and that was if they were willing to share with their class something that's been bugging them.
Yeah.
So again, it's that personal level with me, but now they're getting personal with their classmates. And granted, only like 3 kids shared, but 3 kids is powerful than no kids sharing.
It's true. Yeah.
And I guarantee you, next time I do it, which will be before they go to 6th grade camp next week, or before promotion, I guarantee you'll have more kids that'll chime in on I wish my classmates knew.
Right.
And one of them was just simple, like I wish my classmates knew that I know I'm short, and that right there is powerful enough to where anytime I hear a short joke now towards that kid, it's like, dude, like he already voices how he feels about that. Like you don't need to share that with the class. Like he's already aware that he's short.
Yeah.
And he even put on his thing like, I know I'm short for my age. I went to the doctor. They told me I'm short for my age. And he said that all that in his, I wish my classmates knew. And for him, it was just like I just want to throw it out there that I know I'm short.
Right.
Just made it be known. Like, I don't need all you guys telling me this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And for him to do that was like, and he thought it was just whatever, like, like sharing some just like random fact that he knows. But I was like, dude, that was huge. Like, for you to even say that, like now the class knows we got to stop, you know?
Right.
So things like that, like bringing that type of stuff with your classmates, where you look like a human being, where you show that you are personable and that you do have your ups and downs as a human being too, will help out. So
that's really cool. That's really, really powerful. And
I think I got off topic. Sorry.
No. Actually, this is the realness and the rawness, really, of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And it's not. How do I say it? The whole student-teacher relationship, it's a complex structure. Mm-hmm. It's a complex thing where you can't just narrow it down because we're all different beings. Yeah. We all have different paths. We all have different situations. At the same time, we recognize that every single one of our classes, even when you put 31 kids together, has its own personality, has its own challenges and struggles in it. So it's not like, oh, well, this works for me, this is going to work for you.
Yeah.
But there is one thing, though. I do like using Edutopia as a big resource. And they did write an article regarding about making student relationships really, really simple. Ironically, as I just finished saying how it's a complex issue. But, I mean, the simplicity about it was pretty much of attacking 3 different areas. And I don't know if you maybe can chime in a little bit. I know as we were talking a little bit about this article, you kind of noticed some things that you already did, which was really, really powerful. So the first focus, if we can just talk about a little bit, basically, how would you establish student-teacher relationships when it comes to time?
Well, the article says like all these different things, but for me, I established my student-teacher relationships outside the classroom. But that's not saying that like it's not with my class. It's on the like you said, on the playground, at recess, even at lunchtime, like eating at lunch with the kids. Like to my colleagues, that might seem like I'm standoffish to them, but they shouldn't. Like that's the least of my worries when I'm there. Like I'm a teacher for these kids, a father figure to some of these kids,
right?
A bigger brother figure to some of these kids. So that's my number one priority when I'm at the school, is to make sure that these kids feel comfortable. And to do that, I feel like they need to see me outside of the classroom. And to do that, I'm out there every day at recess, playing basketball with the kids, playing Foursquare, playing soccer, doing all these things with the kids just to make sure that they see me, that they see, and this goes out to just not even my class. It extends beyond my class. There's kids out there reaching out to me, like introducing themselves to me, and for them to build that relationship with me too, so that way when they get up to 6th grade, they already have a relationship with me. They already see me. They already feel comfortable with me.
Right.
But it's building it outside the classroom, I feel. So taking that time to be outside your classroom with your kids, with being on the playground, being in the lunchroom, eating with them, or doing extracurricular activities. Like I coach soccer at my campus with another colleague of ours, and seeing us in a different light as a sports coach now, doing other extracurricular activities like I did Peace Patrol. I'm doing Peace Patrol right now with another colleague, and being that what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to be invisible on your campus. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You want to be out there. You want to be seen, but at least to the students. You want to be seen to the students and make sure that they know you're someone that they can go to. That's what I wrote there.
Yeah. And I could definitely see that as far as like even when you were. One thing I always respected, and it was a little difficult from my end because I was doing grad school at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But when I would head to class, I'd see you get ready for soccer practice, and being able to see the students just like from even other classes, other grade levels, I get a chance to know you. It just sets everything up. It builds rapport not only in your class but in your school. And you actually also hit something else that I'd like to hit up right now. As far as like I wish my teacher knew. I remember partaking in that exercise, but that also kind of ties into like the whole curriculum part.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about how maybe you'll include opportunities for these relationships to be built in the curriculum? I know you already emphasized the I wish my teacher knew kind of like exercises, but is there anything else that you guys do?
In terms of restorative practices,
or restorative practices, or like how does student teacher relationships look like in the classroom?
I would say more student teacher relationships for we have Sanford Harmony that we're using currently in the district, and I would say that's more geared towards student to student relationships.
Okay.
For me, what I like to do is I like to tie in like personal stories with whatever we're learning. So like if we're learning about the explorers coming to Latin America or South America, I like to tie in like, I've actually gone to Costa Rica and blah blah blah, and tell them a little story about my experience in Costa Rica, and that builds into like, oh, they speak Spanish in Costa Rica.
Right.
Why do you think they speak Spanish in Costa Rica? And then tying it back into, the explorers came from Spain. So that background story of me going to Costa Rica and me having a language barrier because they speak Spanish, and then tying it back into their content, which is the Spanish explorers, it really does help them and see it in a different light. And, I always do that. I always find a way to tie in whatever we're learning to a personal story. And, whenever I get letters from kids, or when I get notes from kids on like Teacher Appreciation Week or at the end of the school years, one of the things that kids always say is they like how I tell stories, because I'll go on and on and on and tell a story. Yeah. But again, that goes back to them seeing me as a human being, and seeing me as a person that's gone through different experiences, that just wants to share his experiences with them. And I feel like that just brings me down to their level again, and makes the learning experience a little bit better, because then I go, all right, now let's tie it back to what we're learning. Right. And then it makes the learning more, it just connects the learning a little bit more for them. Like, oh, my teacher experienced this, now we're going to learn about it. So it or I'll even let a kid share, like a kid, like at that time where I'm telling my story, or like if a kid ever just says, I have a connection with this, like that works too, because then it lets them share an experience that they've had with something that deals with the readings, or the text for that day. But yeah.
What about and then the last thing I want to, just for the sake of time, but planning, as you and your colleagues are planning, and then you guys are just looking at the curriculum, and you guys are getting ready to plan things out for the quarter and whatnot. I mean, I know for a fact that like we would always include, even in our plans, all right, community circles. Like we're gonna get ready for that. We're gonna include that, and or different things, especially there was like cultural awareness things, or during Christmas break or the winter breaks that we would have students do kind of like an inventory as far as like go ahead and do like a family heritage project, you know, and then have an opportunity for them to share about that, and seeing that we really do care about first off the things that they're dealing with, and then also that, like where they come from and what's basically the fabric of their DNA. So is there anything that you can maybe add on to that as far as like basically planning for moments and teachable moments like this?
Yeah, well, looking at the or after reading the article, it says that like he does an all about me presentation, and you know, like for me it's having that constant conversation with the kids. Like I don't really plan, like I feel like a lot of teachable moments come unplanned for me.
Yeah.
So I do plan like community circles, like I was telling you earlier, like how I want to kind of change up the way I do a community circle next year and kind of go like table group circles first and then go classroom circle after, just because I feel like it'll be a much more organized circle, because I felt like my classroom circles this year were kind of getting a little bit disorganized. So like having a huddle and then having a group circle.
Right.
So that's one thing that I want to plan for next year. But you know, like as far as planning a student-teacher relationship, it's hard. You just have to know that you have to make time for it. I think that's the only thing that you could plan for, is to make time to hear a student out, to contact parents, to build a teacher-parent relationship too, so that way the parent feels comfortable like letting you know, like, hey, this is going on at home, like can you check in on my kid? Because if you don't have that teacher-parent relationship, like if something's happening at home, you're not going to know, and you're not going to be able to check in with that kid. Like right now, there's something, like I have a parent who just voiced how she wants me to check in on her daughter.
Right.
And I've been checking in on her, and it's making that daughter, it's putting her in a better light. You know, it's making her happier to see that I'm checking in on her. So for that purposes, like you need to plan to make sure you have a way to connect with your parents, a way for you to now make time for your students to build that relationship. You know, like I've worked with Dr. Dominique Smith, who at my time at their campus at Health Sciences High, like the one thing that they preached on me as a new teacher, because I went out there fresh out the program, fresh out the credential program, fresh out a master's program, and thankfully like Doug Fisher hired me in, and the one thing that they preached on me was to build a relationship with the kids.
Right.
You know, especially with that demographics of students. You want to build a relationship with the kids and make sure that these kids trust you and know that you're there for you. And that was the plan. That was the plan from the beginning, because my job there was an intervention teacher, and I had to work one-on-one with these kids, and some of them didn't trust the teacher. Like I started relationships with some of these kids where they were hiding. They would legit hide from me in their classrooms or not come out to work with me. But slowly but surely, you know, it's like you just go slowly at a time, and they realize like, hey, this guy is actually here to help me. He's actually here to not just be my teacher, but to actually help me get through these rough first years of high school.
Yeah.
And planning like that, like making sure that you're planning to build that student-teacher relationship, because if you're not, then it's never going to happen.
Right.
So like that's the one thing that I took from that school, from that site when I worked there, and it was building a relationship. And to this day, I talk to those kids that I coached at that school, to kids that I had a personal relationship with that school, and you know, like some of them are off having babies now, some of them are well, you know, like legitimate babies,
right?
You know,
Right,
but
they're grown up.
Yeah,
right.
They're grown up already.
Yeah.
But you know, like it's just, and they're inviting me. It's like one of them invited me over to their kids' birthday parties, because she lives out here in Chula Vista.
Yeah.
And you know, just to build that relationship with them, even when I left the campus, even when I left the school, for them to reach out to me and to still fill me in on what's going on in their lives is a big. It shows like how much these teachers or these students care.
You're
about
a part of their life
yes.
now. It's one of those things. They're just like, you know what, you had a big impact.
Yeah.
And all in all, you're a part of their family.
Yeah.
And they look at it that way, and it's just like when they see you, like, hey, you know what? I feel secure, and I'm inviting you into my inner circle now. Like, I'm inviting you to be part of this.
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful.
And when you feel like you're a teammate of theirs, when you feel like you're a peer, not a peer, I wouldn't say a peer, but more of like you get like going down to their level, and you sharing, like me sharing my tough experiences as a teenager growing up.
Yeah.
Like we were talking, and me sharing what I went through as a teenager growing up, and me sharing the knucklehead things that I did as a teenager growing up.
Right.
We at Health Sciences, we started a boys group, right? And that was to try to get these boys that were acting rough in classrooms, to get them to realize, like, hey, we've done that too.
Right.
Like, we were there, we were at your level, we did all that stuff. But we got to change, because we're at a school where your teachers do care for you here, and just kind of changing the way that they see a teacher, like I got to say, like one of like all those kids that we put in that boy group, they all graduated high school. A lot of them got accepted to a 4-year college.
Nice.
And it's through the work that we did. I'm not going to say the boys group changed them, but it's like the work of all the teachers at the school building a relationship.
It's like that phrase, it takes a village to build.
Yes, yeah. And like I was telling you earlier, in terms of planning, like at schools, like we need to plan like restorative practices within our own staffs. Like doing community circles as a staff, doing all the things that we're preaching to these kids, we should be doing as a staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which is what we did at Health Sciences High, and which is why I felt like it was bittersweet when I had to leave, because like I felt like that was my family. I felt like that staff was my family. But I've always wanted, my heart was always in elementary, and I had to come back. So there was an opportunity for me to leave, and that I just had to take up on that opportunity.
Yeah, well,
and they knew, they knew.
It's that whole idea of succession too. It's like, you know what, like what you got to learn there, you got a chance to take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that even influenced me as far as just even my teaching practices and my classroom behavior management, and even the way I would took. So it's one of those things that change happens for a reason, and I know we can continue diving a lot more into this, because again, like we mentioned earlier, this is a topic that is going to continue being just researched in the next upcoming few years, and hopefully we shared some really inspiring stories and even some authentic stories with some of our listeners out there that allow us. So I want to thank you, Mr. Ejanda,
I appreciate
for being with us. Yeah, of course. And I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in today. Please feel free to send an email to cbgarcia@sandiego.edu with any questions or topics of discussion. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Innovative PEDAG. That is our Twitter handle. Unfortunately, the whole Innovative Pedagogy was not available. I believe that the characters were too long, but either way, you can find us on there. We'll tune into our next episode. Next time, we'll be meeting with some friends of ours from the San Diego County of Education from the Innovation Department. So that'll be our June episode. We're looking forward to that. All right, so I hope everyone has a great finish to their school year right now. And
speaking of which, can I give a shout out to my students?
Let's do it. Go for it.
Hey, Mr. Ejanda's class at Rice Elementary. Hey, we're nearing the end of the school year. Make sure we finish off strong, and an early congratulations to graduating. Actually, I'll congratulate Mr. Fabio and Miss Cookie's class too. Finish off strong, and let's end the school year right. It's lit.
Hey, all right. Thank you guys. Have a great one.